Hi, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, Unlocking Time and Reducing the Mental Load. We only have 30 minutes, so I'm going to just jump right into it. I'm Ellie Wendell, CEO and co-founder of Persist. And this particular workshop is focused on users that are already inside the app. So we are going to cover some foundational things very quickly and then talk through the results of the CareLoad assessment and specifically some of the goals of CareQuest. Really quick note on language and inclusion. We are going to focus on this particular presentation on the dynamics that are most common within male and female partnerships, but we are absolutely for all families, all identities, and all caregivers. Something that most of us feel, but maybe not all of us have seen sort of quite in this way is what 24 hours looks like for the average working caregiver in the US at least. And one of the things you probably notice is that there is a lot of time, 4.5 hours sort of dedicated to domestic labor and caregiving. Very little time for basic needs. This is showering, this is going to the bathroom, brushing teeth. And most families only get about 45 minutes of quality time. And so when you feel overwhelmed, it's because it really is a relentless amount of work that so many families are trying to juggle. On top of it being a lot of work, there's also a lot of that work that's invisible, right? So a lot of us are seeing the dishes and the laundry and taking the kids to soccer practice. But what is typically very heavy for most families is this invisible labor, right? It's this mental load, it's the anticipating the needs and preparing for those needs. So in this example of a birthday party, you can see, right, on the day of the party, it really only represents at most a third of the work because 2/3 of the work has already happened prior to the party even happening. And this is probably one of the biggest unlocks for families is oftentimes the visible work will be shared relatively evenly, and the invisible work is just not really understood even by the person carrying it and particularly by the person who is not. And so one of the big things that Persist and this CareLoad assessment is going to do is help make this invisible part underneath the iceberg visible so you can start to have constructive conversations around who's doing this work and the value of this work. Most families default into not a great system, my family included, and most all of the families that I talk to have some level of this system where work, particularly invisible work, defaults to one person without necessarily a proactive discussion on why are we doing this work, who's best suited to do this work, and there's sort of a conscious delegation of it, right? It just defaults. Particularly after welcoming a new baby is when we see this being most acute. Often the invisible labor is not understood or appreciated. There isn't a lot of shared language that can be used to describe this work, including the decision fatigue of anticipating and planning and all the decisions that you make as you go through that process. If there are unclear or uncommunicated standards, if you're not reviewing things as season change, for example, because something, a dynamic and a sharing of work might really make sense when you have one child, but as you add another child or a new work or increased work travel, or you have a sick parent, the work probably needs to be divided in a different way as your family evolves and grows. And this bad system, while a lot of times we focus on, in many cases, it is the woman carrying more and she's feeling overwhelmed, it does not work well for either partner, right? There is resentment, burnout, frustration, disconnection, discouragement on both sides of this. So we really aimed with Persist, and we hope you find this to be true in the app that is really built for couples, for families, for both partners to be able to share what it is that they contribute to their family, feel valued and appreciated for that work, and at least have some understanding of all the work it takes to make your family function on a day-to-day basis. In order to do that, right, again, we're going to get into the app and sort of exactly how some of the features help you implement a new system that's going to have shared values and standards, visibility and accountability. And how do you start to make decisions on what's best for your family? The other thing you're not going to see in Persist is us telling you how to divide the work. Maybe it's 90-10. There is no right division of labor. There's no right standards. It's just what is going to work for your family in this season of life. And the system is really designed to help you discover what that is. So many of us make decisions on what was best for the family we were raised in, or maybe the way our family was structured a year or two ago, rather than what really works for our family right now. There's also concepts around what does ownership of a full task mean, and how can we include both partners in the anticipating and planning work. Ultimately, what we have found from couples that implement this is much better communication, less resentment, more fairness and balance. And for me personally, and for a lot of families, it's really about setting really great examples for your children of what collaboration and teamwork looks like from the caregivers in their life, and making sure we're highlighting men as very capable caregivers, which they absolutely are. My partner cooks most of our meals, he's far better at it. Our girls can't even conceptualize me cooking meals because they recognize that it's not. I do make ramen noodles, but basically it's highlighting that we are humans that have talents and skills that are very independent of gender in most cases. And we're also fixing a skill gap, because some of the reasons that families struggle is that in many cases, women were taught to anticipate and plan and to prioritize the needs of others. And they have taken on that role sooner in their life, maybe for their siblings. So some of this has been taught where men have not been expected to do that work. And so in many ways, that skill gap is expected and understood. But how do we help bridge that gap both now as well as for future generations, so that gap doesn't even exist anymore? What we're going to talk through today very quickly is, what does this toolkit inside Persist actually look like? The CareLoad assessment is a really critical first step, because this is what's going to help you understand current state. You should take it with a grain of salt. It is directional, but it is meant to help you understand how much work goes into keeping our house functioning right now. How is that work divided? How heavy is that work? How much time does that work take? So before you can really start to help shift things and build a balance that works for you, you have to understand current state. So that's what the CareLoad assessment is all about. The CareQuest framework is that guided process of helping you and your partner align on important things like values and standards, finding your why. Why do we do this task? Why is it important? How do we do it? Who does it? Really explicit conversations. And then ongoing tools like the collaboration dashboard that help you actually make those shifts. And what do we mean by the shift method? It's really about, how do you actually reduce overwhelm? So great, we now know current state. My partner and I are working on the same page. How do we actually reduce the amount of work that we're doing? There's really three ways to do it. You can stop doing the work. And as you start to align on values and standards, it might become very clear to both of you that there's just work that isn't valuable for either of you to do. And you can just take a breath and say, hey, let's stop doing that. Maybe because you haven't had a conversation, you each think that the other person wants to do this activity. And you find with a discussion that you're both happy to simply stop. That's a huge win. Shape is very important. And this is where you really get into those standards and understand why do we do the things that we do, and what does good laundry look like? What does a good meal look like? What does success look like for some of these different tasks inside your home? And you might find that you are doing things to a standard that doesn't actually make sense for your family, given your season, your budget, your dynamics, your work schedule, right? And so having an open conversation about standards is one way to get a bunch of time back, because are there things that you could just be doing more efficiently that gets you some much needed time back? And share. So are there things that can shift to your partner's plate, or in some cases to outsource help to your children or even folks in your village that might also be able to help them? If it was easy, Persist wouldn't exist, and you'd hang up on the presentation right now, because you'd say, great, I get it. But the reality is that it takes quite a bit of introspection and communication to really make these shifts, because stopping doing things, oftentimes, particularly for women, triggers a lot of guilt and fear of judgment, and you're letting people down. And there is a lot of fear around what happens if I simply stop doing something that I've always done, or that I think others/society expects me to do. Shaping something forces us to question our identity. It can feel really defensive when someone is like, why do you fold clothes like that? Right? Rather than asking yourself honestly, why do I fold clothes like this? Why? Oh, because it helps them not be wrinkly. But really sort of questioning why things are done a certain way can actually be pretty challenging work, but it's really critical. And then obviously sharing the work takes trust and communication and letting go of control. And that is very hard to do. So first things first that you do inside the free version of Persist is take this CareLoad assessment. And you're going to start to understand who's carrying that mental load, where are the biggest imbalances, and then which areas might you be able to redistribute. One thing we've seen pretty consistently, we had over 3,000 people take this assessment, is that we typically see about a 75-25 split. This tends to be around gender lines. So 75% of the work and care load is typically carried by the female in the household, with men carrying 25 split. This isn't always the case. We've had it absolutely where this is reversed. We've had cases where it's 50-50, but this is by far the starting point for most families inside of Persist. And by the completion of CareQuest, we see a split a little bit more like 60-40, which for an average household that has 100 hours of work for a single person, we are talking about unlocking 15 hours a week in terms of being able to shift some of these things. So it can be pretty pronounced and exciting to start to see what can we shift. And again, I don't just mean shifting work from one partner to the other. When we talk about shift, we're talking about shifting things off our plate entirely, talking about shifting our standards or our beliefs in such a way that the work is easier to do or more fun to do, quite frankly. So there are a lot of shifts that we're talking about. It's not just about shifting from one partner to the other. What you're going to see under your household insights, so inside the app under the tab household insights, you are going to see an output of your total care per week and how that is divided. One thing to keep in mind is that we have put in a baseline estimate of care load and time for these tasks based on a family of 4, so 2 children. In the premium version, you can edit. So if, for instance, your extracurricular activities for your kids, they're very young, that number is very low. If you have a family of 3 and they're all in high school, that number might be very high. It's intended for you to edit so that your insights really accurately reflect the real work going on as well as how it's divided. The other pieces of metrics that you're going to see under insights is a concept called CareLoad. And one of the reasons that we developed this is because we noticed that while time is very important, it's finite. Everybody has 24 hours, and it's really important that we acknowledge that and just understand the time that everyone is putting in. But we also know that tasks are not created equal. There are tasks that are just heavier. They are more exhausting. They are more relentless. They weigh much heavier on you. And we wanted to have a metric that also helped couples really be able to communicate how heavy certain things are. And so every task inside of Persist has a CareLoad score. It is made up of these 5 different areas, and it results in a score between 1 and 5. So if every single one of these things is true, a task is going to have a CareLoad of 5. That is the heaviest that a task can be. This means if it is a 5, it means that this task is emotional. It requires self-regulation and managing of emotions. I'm going to use the example of taking care of an elderly sick parent. Very emotional to do that, very heavy work. The cognitive effort, the mental effort of managing their medications, doctor's appointments, like the mental load of just anticipating what are they going to need and asking the hard questions. It's a huge mental effort that goes into that. Also, you can't take a day off when you are managing the health of somebody. And so every single day you are blocking and tackling and doing another activity. And for instance, doctor's appointments are not flexible. So if you're taking a parent to dialysis and it always has to be at a specific time, that really reduces your autonomy, right? So we also really want to highlight in CareLoad that somebody that has tasks that are not flexible has less autonomy. And that's an important thing to realize as you're thinking about how to share things. And then just favorability. We don't put this in the free version because we don't know what you like and dislike, but in the premium version, you can add this extra weight to tasks that for whatever reasons really grind your gears. For me, it's taking my kids to doctor's appointments. It stresses me out. I don't know why I hate it. It really weighs on me in a way that doesn't particularly make sense. I think it's tied to COVID and all of those things, but I flagged it. My partner, I discussed it, and he's like, I'll take them to doctor's appointments. I used to be a paramedic, and actually, I really enjoy taking them. And so, what an easy win. And we talk about being able to reduce care load. Sometimes just swapping tasks in a way that somebody is taking a task, it's just not as heavy for them. It's just not as emotional. Maybe one partner has ADHD and the other partner doesn't. And there's just some tasks that are a lot more challenging for somebody with ADHD. And by the way, there are tasks that are much easier for somebody that can hyperfixate, right? So it's really about stepping back and playing to your strengths rather than having things default based on gender or even just defaulting because the person that was there to take it on and you never really thought, does that actually make sense? So that's what you're going to see with CareLoad. It's this really cool spider chart. So you can see, is one person carrying far more of the mental load or the emotional load? You're going to be able to spotlight the intensity as well as some hot spots. If you see that one person is their frequency is all the way here and their partners is barely registering, it means that one person is carrying all of the daily grinds, right? The trash, the laundry, the dishes, the stuff that is relentless. It has to happen every single day. That gets exhausting very quickly. So that can be potentially a hot spot that you want to highlight with this chart. As you go through the Insights tab, you're going to see each one of these categories underneath CareLoad spotlighted directly. So you can see, whoa, in this case, time-bound tasks are really unequal, right? Sarah is carrying most of the tasks that have to happen at a specific time. That might make sense, right? That might be the only thing. Joe travels a lot. There isn't a shift that can happen. Or maybe viewing this graph actually helps you say, oh, we can move some things around. So you're not always in charge of leaving the house at 8 a.m. You're not always in charge of leaving work right at 4. That can be very stressful from a career perspective if one person has no room for error in terms of when they leave the house and arrive back somewhere else. Once you have your care load assessment in a place that you think really reflects current state, now it's the fun part of collaborating either internally, right? What is the internal work that you can do to really understand your values and your beliefs and standards? This whole process can happen individually and it can happen as a couple. It often happens, both are best. So if you're each internally understanding what you think and collaborating with your partner, it's really about unpacking what matters most to your family. Beliefs are a really big part of this. If you believe that it is your job to do something and only your job, it will be hard to share that work. If you believe that your identity and self-worth is tied to a very specific exacting standard, it's going to be really hard for you to adjust standards. And so these things are really worth a look and an unpack. And that's what you're going to get from CareQuest. So that's the tab on the far left. You can work through it sequentially, or you can dabble in the modules that make the most sense for you. We have built it in a way that you can do it linearly so that you can say, listen, I want to do a full household reset. I know where we're starting. I want to move to a place with more appreciation and better balance. Great. CareQuest is going to guide you from A to Z exactly in order. Collaborate is where, think of this as kind of like your workbook. This is going to be current state of how much, what's assigned to Joe, what's assigned to Sarah, the details of those things in terms of the amount of time that those things take to do, as long as the care load of those. This is where you can pin things. So if you want to pin meals and say, I'd like to talk about switching this next week so that you can own meals, or pin something that you want to talk about, maybe readjusting standards. So this is where you can also view tasks that are not applicable for your home. You can reassign things to each other, or you can click NA and say, actually, on the shift method, if you find a thing that you're saying, actually, we don't need to do it anymore, amazing. You're going to see your insights reflected as you play around with Collaborate. Both this page as well as Insights will reflect those changes that you're making. In the premium version, you can add custom tasks, which can be really important. So for instance, you could add your paid work. So if one partner spends 40 hours doing paid work and one spends 60, that can be really important to put into Insights, because that impacts how you can share work at home. If somebody is traveling, you could add in travel hours, all of the ways in which you might Want to make sure that you're really reflecting current state. You can do that through custom tasks, through editing CareLoad, and through editing hours. Thank you so much for coming today. It can feel overwhelming, but small shifts make a big difference. So just pick one task, go to collaborate, pick one task that has been a sticking point, pin it, and set some time to talk to your partner about that task. And if at all possible, approach that conversation with curiosity. You're looking to understand why this is tense, as little sort of judgment as possible, because starting from a place of love and curiosity is absolutely the best way to have a productive conversation. And I know how hard that can be if you're feeling resentful because nothing you've done so far has made a difference, but you're looking to really turn a fresh page. You can consider premium. So if you upgrade to the premium version, you can invite your partner directly into the app. You have a shared app experience. They can take the CareLoad assessment as well, and it's going to compare your results together, because your CareLoad results are your perspective, which may be incredibly accurate or maybe less so. So giving your partner a chance to contribute their perspective of what it looks like today, they can pin tasks that they are also feel are weighing on them or they want to discuss. It's a very collaborative way to get on the same page. Please tell us what you need and please share your feedback. We are always available. You can email help@timeforpersist.com. Really appreciate you all being here, and feel free to chat if you have any questions